Hello everyone, my name is Martin Fornusek. I'm a senior news editor at the Kyiv Independent. We are joined today by Peter Layton, defense and aviation expert, associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, and visiting fellow at Griffith University to discuss Ukraine's new F-16 fighter jets. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Last weekend, we finally got to see Ukraine's first F-16 fighter jets. Do we know what specific model of F-16s did Ukraine receive?
It's a little difficult to tell from the video that I've seen, but certainly looks like a fairly recent model of F-16C. So a single seat fighter jet, and the version we saw looked like it had a full electronic warfare fit, and was carrying 4 air-to-air missiles.
How do such fighter jets compare to Ukraine's Soviet-era fighters like MiG-29?
The MiG-29 is very much an analog aircraft. In the actual cockpit itself, there's lots of old watch faces, if you like, and in fact there is even a clock in it on the instrument panel. But the F-16 is very much a digital aircraft, from the digital flight controls down to the digital displays in the cockpit. So it will certainly be a marked change for the pilots flying it.
Based on what we've seen, is there anything specific you can tell us about the armaments of the F-16s Ukraine received?
From the pictures and the videos that I've seen of the welcome given to them, they were carrying a couple of large external fuel tanks, so they'll have a reasonable range and endurance. They're carrying 4 air-to-air missiles, two Sidewinder missiles, which are short-range infrared guided, and 4 AMRAAM, which are longer-range radar-guided missiles.
There was a discussion in Ukraine that thanks to their range of over 100 kilometers, Ukraine could use MRAMs to intercept Russian fighter bombers that drop glide bombs on Ukraine ground troops. Do you think that is feasible?
I think it would be technically hard. For a starter, the Ukrainian fighter has to be in the right place at the right time. And we're talking about, and the glide bombs are being used right on the front line between the Ukrainian and the Russian forces. And the Russian aircraft are typically, apparently, from what you read, dropping the glide bombs about 40 or 50 kilometres from the front line. So the Ukrainian aircraft has to stand back from the front line, probably another 50 kilometres, to avoid being engaged by the Russian surface-to-air missile systems, which are around the front line area. So I think that would be a difficult task. And so it is not just with that sort of range problem, but is also a hand issue because the Ukrainian aircraft has to be in the right place at the right time, and so that will need guidance from a ground-based radar system and air-based radar, AWACS or airborne early warning aircraft, such as the Saab aircraft. Now they're very vulnerable to Russian surface-to-air missiles as well, so they would have to stand back a fair way. So you can see, just to keep both the AEW aircraft and the fighter aircraft safe on the Ukrainian side, this is a difficult ask.
But Ukraine is expecting to receive some kind of surveillance early warning aircraft from Sweden, so these could help in this task?
Yes, certainly. They will help a great deal. But again, I think they're only getting a couple of aircraft, so having it airborne at the right time in the right place will be difficult as well, because the Russians can choose to attack with their glide bombs when they wish. So they will know when the airborne early warning aircraft is airborne, because as it transmits a very large electronic signature. So you can certainly tell once it is up. And if it is up, then the Russians might just simply hold off their air attacks until the aircraft has gone away.
Theoretically, can the F-16s we've seen be used for other tasks such as ground strikes?
Certainly, they could be used for say close air support at the front line. When I mean close air support, it's not the sort of the World War II image of the Stuka bombers machine gunning tanks, etc., or even like the A-10s during the Iraq wars. But rather, the F-16s are fitted and have come with the small diameter bombs, which are 250-pound fairly small bombs, but they have small wings on them, and they're glide bombs also, and they can be dropped about 50 kilometres, 50, 60 kilometres from the front line. Now, the advantage of those SDBs is that the F-16s could say carry 8 of them, and each bomb can be programmed to go into a different target. So unlike the Russian ones that sort of all end up at the same place, if you like, these will fly across the front line and hit 8 individual different aim points.
According to the estimates, Ukraine likely received no more than 10 F-16s in its first batch. Can such a small number have some significant impact on the battlefield?
On the battlefield, it is unlikely. Certainly, they would help the air defence commander wage his air defence war, but they can only carry a relatively small number of missiles, and they can only stay airborne for a relatively short period of time. So with 10 on each day, you might have, say, 7 aircraft serviceable, and you may be able to get a couple of sorties out of most of those. So you'd fly between 10 or, say, 12 sorties a day, or inside a 24-hour period. They'll be useful for that air defence role, but in the battlefield, they would have to be, if you like, husband and then employed to some set up plan so that you could surge that force at the right place at the right time. Certainly, that kind of a surge for a short period of time, and if you have, say, 7 aircraft and they each drop eight small diameter bombs as well, that's 56 weapons arriving, possibly within 30 seconds of each other. That's a reasonable force, if you like, a reasonable impact on the battlefield, but you have to get the aircraft again in the right place at the right time, and have that coordinated very closely with your ground forces, so they could take advantage of such a strike.
President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukraine needs at least 128 F-16s to successfully counter Russia. Do you agree with this, or do you have your own estimate?
Those are figures that I've seen elsewhere, and they're based upon using F-16s in a variety of roles. For the suppression of enemy air defences, that is actually killing surface-to-air missile sites, for ground attack, and having others reserved for air defence. That's certainly a reasonable number, and you would expect to have most of the, sort of say 80 or 90 serviceable each day. Especially looking sort of longer term, that sounds like a reasonable fighter force. Bearing in mind, of course, that the Ukrainian front line is very, very long. So those 80 aircraft or so won't actually cover very much of each area. So you'd still have to use them carefully.
Western countries currently prohibit Ukraine from using their arms to strike deep inside Russian territory. If such restrictions were lifted, how could it affect the way that F-16s can be used?
I think you'd still want to be fairly careful, because the F-16 will still be vulnerable to those Russian air defences, which are still very effective. The electronic warfare systems that the Ukrainian aircraft have will certainly work to some extent, but no electronic warfare system gives you a 100% reliability. You are bound to take some losses. Once you cross the border into, say, Russian territory, and some aircraft was shot down, you are not just losing the aircraft, you're also losing the pilot. And pilots are hard to come by, and they are scarce, valuable items. So I think there'll still be a tendency to restrict the aircraft's use inside the Ukrainian airspace, unless for some special kind of operation that required something for a short period of time, and the Ukrainian government wanted to both take the risk and accept the risk that some aircraft and some pilots may not come back. I think that the Air Force, with its Storm Shadows and its Scalp missiles, can still do a fair bit from inside the Ukrainian airspace. And of course, there's the ATACMS as well. So I'm not too sure that the F-16 will be used for such roles, except perhaps on special occasions.
Russia has been attacking Ukrainian airfields shortly before the F-16s arrive. What can Ukraine do to better protect its new fighter jets?
The Ukrainian Air Force has been very effective about defeating Russian attacks, not just from shooting down missiles aimed at the airfields, but in moving aircraft around and using false deceptive targets. So the Ukrainian Air Force is very well practiced at this. So I think they'll be playing some form of a shell game where they'll move the aircraft around and the maintenance people and survive that way. I mean, really, the Ukrainian Air Force has done extraordinarily well over the last couple of years because while they've been up against a very large force firing cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and drones, etc., the Air Force is still flying. So I think that everybody will be watching how the Ukrainian Air Force does this survival against such a threat, and most air forces will be certainly hoping to pick up some hints and some lessons.
Do you foresee some challenges in terms of maintenance, repairs?
Maintenance is always a problem, and the aircraft will certainly break up, and have to have bits and pieces replaced. While they're designed to be relatively easy to be maintained, often it is taking black boxes and bits off the aircraft and sending them off to some maintenance hangar elsewhere. So I think for the operational level maintenance, that will certainly be done in the Ukraine. But as the components break, they'll be sent out of the country to be fully repaired. And there's bound to be some battle damage as well, and some accidents. So the maintenance will be a constant battle, if you like.
Thank you. That's it from me. Peter, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.